Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Marketers have been working on personalization since the dawn of the internet, and actually even earlier than that. Now with AI, you can deliver ads made for each of your customers. Publicis Sapient is committed to faster, better personalization and is proud to introduce Slingshot and Bodhi AI. Now, these AI platforms are designed to customize every key touch point and reduce creative timelines from weeks to days. With Publicis Sapient, marketing isn't just fast, it's personal. Smarter marketing, happier teams, wow-worthy customer moments. Upgrade your marketing at publicissapient.com. Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Nancie McDonnell Ruder. Today's topic, you're brought in to fix the brand. Now what? Now, Nancie is the founder of Noetic, a consulting firm that focuses on strengthening brands from the inside out. We'll talk about what that actually means in a bit. She started her career at Leo Burnett, where she was a vice president before leaving to form Noetic. Welcome, Nancie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I am a huge listener, Mike.
Thank you. So Nancie, let's start by clarifying exactly what we are talking about when we say this problem. There's so many ways of saying it. Fix the brand, stand up the brand, build the brand, relaunch the brand, reposition the brand. Tell us what you mean when you are looking at a brand problem here.
Yes, there is a whole range, and people do use a lot of different words to describe it. And truly, they can be anywhere on that range. So at times there's a brand crisis, and truly they need a transformation. At times it's refinement, and oftentimes it's somewhere in between. So what we always recommend is look at what your audience is that you serve, what they really think about you, where are you right now? And so we say, like, lead with your who in order to know your what and what is it about your what? Like, is it healthy and what do you have going on? So, for example, a few years back, we were working with Georgetown University in DC, my undergrad alma mater, and they really just needed refinement. They still are highly regarded, both by, the students who seek to go there, their parents, the current students, alumni, faculty, internal staff. But their challenge was that their marketing is so decentralized, and it remains a challenge for them. But at the time, it had really gotten very scattered.
Well, let's back up and tell us this problem, because that means, my guess, every college at Georgetown was doing their own marketing.
Yes.
And there wasn't any overarching, hey, this is what Georgetown is about. It was, this is the business school, this is the law school, this is, the
That's exactly right.
school. And
that's exactly right.
They actually figured out they had a problem, because probably all those.
Yeah, it was at the highest level.
Yeah.
It was at the highest level. So our main client was the right hand of the president, but it was really driven by, he was their head of overall strategy across all the campuses. And you're exactly right. They had marketing folks in each and every one of those organizations. The only place they had shared marketing was across grad programs, but medical school, different, law school, different, grad program, undergrad, all different from each other. And so they had never defined the brand at that master or global level. And they were seeing a little bit of softness in what they call yield. So yield is a very big metric in higher ed. It's like the number of people you let in versus the number of people.
You want a whole lot to apply, and then you only want to let in like 4. So you can
Right.
your
So,
acceptance rate is
right,
like
exactly. So
so
you want a
little.
low
Yeah.
number when it comes to like, how many you're letting in, but you want your yield to be high. So the
Yeah.
people that you want to come. So they were seeing a little bit of softness there. But I mean, all you really had to do was Google their, Georgetown logos, and you could see the mess that they had. And so it was really about like a problem that was gonna become a bigger problem if they let it fester. So we call that refinement.
So that's refinement. Let's talk about crisis. Give us just 2 or 3 other examples, and then we'll go into what's the real issue versus the perceived issue.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So I would say most often there's 2 other flavors besides refinement. One flavor is we've actually never stood up the brand. We just haven't done that work yet. And you'd be surprised sometimes just the size and scope of companies who haven't ever stood up the brand before. And one such company is Mayo Clinic. We started working with them back pre-pandemic, and
And
they just
just
haven't
one
done
thing,
that
when you
work
say
yet.
stand up the brand, that means the brand has never been purposely managed. Is that what you mean?
That's just about right. So I'm sure you've seen like in certain organizations, marketing is actually more so just communications,
Yeah.
right? There's not really like a marketing function really within the organization. In some industries, it happens more than others. Some industries are just not as advanced, in that area, and healthcare has been one. Higher ed is another. Those are 2 sectors we do a
Yeah.
lot of work in. And so in the case of Mayo, while they had not done the work to define the brand, they did have metrics and they could see how they were doing versus their competitors. So, we're talking like Cleveland Clinic or Anderson kind of thing. And they were starting to see a lot of encroachment.
Yeah.
We were always like, Mayo is Mayo, right? It's like, we don't have to, we don't
You
have
don't
the
have to do
time to
anything because they're so amazing. Yeah.
right. And lo and behold, like their competition was starting to do a lot of marketing and defining their own brands. And so they really needed to do that work. So that's definitely a flavor is like, we got to stand at the brand because we've not done that work yet. And then I would say the brand crisis. So we are working with a big healthcare system right now. I'm not going to share their name. They are in brand crisis. So this is a situation where their audiences, for them, primarily their community. So the community within communities within which they reside are not uh, are are not happy with them. Have a negative perception. It's mostly, frankly, an uninformed perception, and so situations like that where you're really on decline, that's significant. That's really brand transformation work. So it really can exist on a spectrum. I do want to say, like, every 1 to 3 years, you got to really be looking hard at your brand, but you should always be caring for the health of your brand. It should be not ever a set it and forget it.
Agreed. Now, one of the things I have to point out is the 3 companies, the 2 you named and the one you didn't name, they all feel like nonprofits to me, which feel like nonprofits are in my mind very late to the party to think about their brand. Is this, when you look at these problems, are they pretty much like lodged into a lot of nonprofits?
There's a fair amount of for-profits who also have not, stood up their brand. And you don't see organizations lead with brand in their marketing, and I wouldn't even recommend like at the startup level, companies.
Yeah, you don't need a brand. You
You don't need it yet,
need
right?
effort.
You don't have a story to tell yet. But it can often get neglected where it's like high time. And I have seen that happen in a fair number of for-profits. I do agree with you, though, that in nonprofit, there's a lag. I think there's definitely a tendency to lag. And one of my theories as to why is that they're very mission driven. And oftentimes people can think, well, if we have our mission and we're clear on our mission, then, we're good. We have our focus, but mission and brand are not exactly the same thing.
At Publicis Sapient, we're not just talking about AI. We're delivering real results. Today, with Sapient AI, we speed up software development and save clients thousands of hours. We revolutionize how travelers discover their perfect getaway.
and even turn a simple fridge scan into a personalized meal plan.
Really?
Making AI work for you? It's what we do.
I would agree with that. So now we've kind of laid out the problems. Let's say now you're talking to a leader here and you say, all right, the company thinks they have an issue, whether they're profit or nonprofit. That may be the issue, but there also might be another real issue. It might not be the brand. It might be this crisis of this company the company who shall not be named. It may be a brand problem, maybe a marketing problem. A lot of times it could be a totally different problem. But they just say, look, we just want to market or PR this whole thing away. How does the leader actually wrap their arms around the real issue, figure out, is that real or not? And then get the company to align, especially if it's different than the company thinks. That's a huge long question. So
it's a multi-part question. It's a great question, though, particularly as it would relate to, like, do we have a product problem of some kind versus do we actually have a marketing problem? And the answer's found in the data. Like, what data do you have? What data is looking troubling, and really pulling that together into a hypothesis that you then have to test out. So you really got to be looking at, what are people responding to? And if you have only the signals to the problems in the data that you have, then you got to go do some primary research to figure out the root cause.
So let's go back to the Mayo Clinic and look at their data. Because a lot of nonprofits, they have data by stack, like they have data by school, and then someone combines it all, but there's nobody looking at the whole thing. And,
they actually were looking at brand data. So they could see things like awareness, affinity, and propensity to travel, which is a key component for them, like travel for.
Yeah, I'll travel because you have the best people.
Exactly.
That's
exactly. And while they might be in your backyard, like, good chance a lot of their patients are not. They really did have those diagnostic metrics at the brand level. But you're right, like, a lot of organizations don't. What they're instead seeing is maybe they're seeing a softness in sales.
Right.
Maybe they're seeing their competitors, starting to do better than them, or, really outpace them. So oftentimes it's just in the financial data, not just, it's in the financial data. And so when you are looking at the problem, but you don't have the hypotheses on why, rather than jumping straight to brand, you really got to do some digging and look across to see what kind of a story you need to pull together. So quick example of that, Samsung some years ago, they had super high awareness. Everybody knew them. And very low affinity. So people knew them and they didn't really care to purchase them. They just didn't have loyalty. And as they were really working their way into the mobile phone market, they, and rightly so, felt that they really needed to stand up their brand at a different level. It couldn't be about kind of, features and just staying in that product world. So,
right, and they were getting at the time, I'm guessing this was a number of years back, where Sony was kind of it, and then Samsung was coming in, and then, but you also had Toshiba. I was at Best Buy, I think, when Samsung was starting
Toshiba.
to rise. There was a bunch of people out there, LG, everybody making noise. Sony had the best position, and Samsung had actually probably a lot of good stuff, but no one actually knew it.
That's exactly right. And do you remember when they had the Galaxy, when they did, like, I mean, from an objective stance on the technology, the Galaxy was superior.
Yeah.
And it had the best, as mobile phones were really coming into mainstream, they had the best cameras, they had the most features. So they knew that they had, or rather, they knew they didn't have a product problem. Right. But they did have a brand problem. They had an affinity problem. So being really careful about, like, why is the data looking the way it's looking? And, I'll say for our part, like, we do ask a lot of questions up front when, organizations come to us, because we don't want to take on work that's not, brand related. Like, if it really is a product that is subpar to what the competition is offering. People are just going to go elsewhere.
Okay. So I'm sitting in here as the leader and I figured out, okay, I've got this is a marketing problem or a brand problem. How do I go about then moving forward? I'm just parachuted in. Let's talk about the best practices and the worst practices. The worst thing you can do if you're given this kind of issue.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of things over the years. I do like to talk about the glass half full. So I'm going to talk a lot about like best practices, but I will mention in terms of worst, I think one of the worst things you can do is not do your homework with your customers. So like we often say to people, like, even if you have a very modest budget, really make sure you understand how your audiences feel about your brand. Like, don't skip it. There are times I have seen organizations, they just kind of think they know,
Well, they have a belief
Yeah.
that they've had for a long time, and that belief is
Yeah.
false. But if I don't have any money and I have this belief, how do I actually, especially if I have no money or no time, how do I actually go do this? Like, I agree, you have to have some real marketplace data, not the collective judgment of a team that is convinced, people should pay a 15% price premium for your product, even though it's the same. How do you go get the data if you don't have money and or time?
Yeah. Well, so I think you need to have, you have to have at least time. And if you don't have time, you need to figure out who you can get who will have time. And there's lots of scrappy, creative ways you can do it. With social, you can get access to your customers at any time and any place. If you have something in-store based or online based, you can do social listening, you can do walkthroughs in stores. Like, there are a lot of really low or no cost ways that you can get a sense for how people are interacting with your product. So really getting creative about it. It will cost you time, whether it's your time, might be somebody else's time. Hire an intern, get somebody junior to do it with a lot of guidance. Like, how can you get access to that data? Or can you afford to do something very thoughtful and qualitative, small sample, so you can check your hypotheses? Because I just think to skip it is perilous.
Well, that's one. I bet there's a best practice. I want to go over the best practices and then the worst things you can do that make sure you're not going to actually solve
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go to the class half full, the best practices. So for best practices, I actually have 5. So if we have time, we can talk about all of them.
Well, why don't you just tick them off really fast and then
Okay.
pick one
So
or-
I have actually labeled these, Mike, as though they are Taylor Swift songs.
all right, let's go with it. And if
They're not Taylor Swift songs.
if you want to sing them, we're okay. So,
I might sing a little. I might get you to sing a little, right? But she's such a
there's a limit
prolific.
to what the host can do on the show.
If I could get you to sing, yeah, I think people would.
Well, let's hear them. Let's
give the people what you want, what they want. Okay, so number 1, teach me tonight. This is about education about brand. Number 2, in harmony. This is about internal alignment.
There's the Georgetown problem. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Number 3, voices unite. This is about getting your key stakeholders to create the brand strategy with you. Spark within. I mean, that's definitely a song she would write, right? That's about truly activating the brand internally. And then the last one, and we were just talking about, is measuring the moment. A little bit of alliteration there.
Wow.
And that's about having the right KPIs.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm not going to even attempt harmony because I would ruin it. So let's just pick one of those, which is the most common you see in the world.
The most common that people trip up on?
Well, this is glass half full. So the most common where you go it, and then we're going to reverse it and talk about the empty part of the glass.
Yeah, very good. Okay. So I would say that the thing that most commonly it's like this invisible thing that gets in the way is the first one. If you want to get everybody, so Teach Me Tonight is about educating about brand. I'm not talking about your particular brand. I'm talking about like, what is brand? And it's just not well understood, sometimes in the marketing function, but certainly outside of the marketing function.
Well, it's only at college, and I'm teaching at a college. I'm teaching at Case Western, and they have a CMO. They have a system-wide CMO to work on stuff like this. But this would be the college, or the brand is bigger than any component of the brand. And here's
Exactly.
why. And that's what you have to teach at Georgetown. And so you're going to hum a few bars of your song now, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. So to teach me to know, what you have to do is you have to get people within the organization to really understand that holistic view of what brand really means. If you don't do that, a couple things typically happen. People just think in terms of a brand campaign. They
Right.
see this as a project, something that is kind of costly. And then, months down the line, they're questioning like, hey, what did we ever get for that? And worst of all, they don't embody it themselves. The truth is, in organizations where brand is really alive and well and everybody's quote unquote living the brand, everybody understands that they are the brand. Everything the brand does is a touch point. I'm going to go back to Mayo for a quick sec because I think they do this so well.
Okay.
When people walk into a Mayo Clinic, these are people who are so stressed out. And the way they get treated by the staff is like they're coming in to a home where they're going to put their arms around them and they're going to do their damnedest to get them a true diagnosis. These are people with complex illnesses, sometimes multiple illnesses. They may have been down a path for a year or longer trying to find out. Now, a lot of brands don't have that life or death, right, situation. But the reason why it's so powerful when you walk inside Mayo and you feel that isn't just because people are in these dire straits. It's because the people inside Mayo live the brand. They understand that they are the brand. And that is the part that gets missed in teaching people what brand is.
We're going to go to the negative. You just said dire straits, so I want to make another music joke, but I won't. That would be money.
Very good.
That would be money.
That's like lower tone, so you'd have to sing that.
Yeah, I would, Mark Knopfler. So let's go. You already talked about one of the worst practices, which is you think the brand is a ad or an effort done by the marketers versus it's an entity that it interacts with the marketplace. Let's talk about some other Hall of Fame mistakes leaders make when they're standing up or fixing the brand.
Yeah. So I would say mistakes is like keeping that brand effort really narrow in terms of who you're involving within the organization. So this is my In Harmony and where we should be singing together. So right up front, we highly recommend to clients do an active listening tour and socialize what you're doing. If you keep it really tight, like, we're just going to have this working team of marketers and, then we'll launch it later, the antibodies get it. And when you're involving those people up front, most importantly, you need to involve those people that you worry might be skeptics.
Yeah, you got to get the negatives right in there. And I will
got it. Get them right on in there. Funny story.
An agency when I've started because a new CMO job, because then I'm signaling to the company that I'm going to solve all the problems, regardless of what I actually know when I come in with advertising. And usually it's not the advertising that's hurting the company.
Right.
So that's problem one. Get everybody on board. What's worse? Do not hog this to your little self and then
Right.
come out like you're Albert Einstein with a piece of genius. What's the other problem people or Hall of Fame worst practices people make?
Yeah. So another one would be to black box what the brand strategy is going to be and do a big ta-da with
Oh,
it.
a reveal. The
A
reveal.
reveal, right? Because when you do a reveal, inevitably, anybody you're revealing to then is sitting there thinking about the with them, right?
Yeah.
How is this going to affect me in my world? And inevitably, it's change. I mean, we don't use the term change management because it freaks people out, but it is. That is what it is. And so if you do like a big reveal, you're gonna buy yourself a world of hurt. We actually do a process, Mike, where we involve the stakeholders in co-creating the brand elements. And it's, some people may think like, well, isn't that like Tom Sawyer? Like you're getting everybody else to paint the fence. Like, weren't you hired to help with create that brand strategy? But it only gets you to drafted elements, but it gets people rolling up their sleeves and doing it with you. And then they can't sit back and cross their arms and be the naysayer. So avoid the black box.
Yes. Look, I always let them contribute. I don't let them vote, which
There
is,
we go.
I'm going to listen a lot. And a lot of times you're going to be right. But this is not a democracy. This is a
Right.
collection of information. Is there any last worst practice you want to throw down on before we move on to a look at the marketplace?
Yeah, I'll go to the spark within, which is about activating internally. So the thing that people can get overly focused on, like, yes, if you're standing up your brand, refining your brand, you're definitely going to do something out in the marketplace to communicate that. But no, don't neglect or short shrift on what you're doing internal to the organization. So if you've done that brand education up front, and then you do some really thoughtful things within the organization to help everybody know their role, people can get excited and be a part of it, which is what you really need to fully live the brand. If instead you're really just focused on the external, it's just going to be a brand campaign. 6 months down the path, you're going to have folks saying to you, hey, like that project's done. We
Well,
spent
look,
money there. What we get?
a lot of folks are watching the Jaguar
Jaguar.
campaign, where they are, they came out with this just flashy, completely over the top video. And, we'll see if there's anything behind it or if that was just one of the mistakes you referenced, which brings me to my next question. If you can look at the marketplace now, and not necessarily your brands, brands on the way to needing help, or a brand that has successfully rebooted itself that aren't yours.
Mhm. So I think two brands come to mind that I think are a little wobbly. One is Sephora and the other one's Apple. So the deal with Sephora, like, have you ever gone into a Sephora store?
Just once.
Did you run out of there?
I didn't run out of there. I looked at it because I thought it was interesting retail, but obviously,
It's fascinating retail. Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Like 1 million SKUs. It's just an amazing feast for your eyes and full of teens and tweens. And my mom, who loves it there, and she's 86, which is a whole other story, but she just loves like cosmetics and retail or whatever and thinks it's fascinating. The thing about Sephora though is that like that's a really fickle customer base.
Yeah.
And there are so many interesting innovations happening in cosmetics and skincare and fragrances that you can get not from Sephora. And so they have this store experience, but they're really getting infringed upon by a lot of competition. Like with Apple, though, like Apple, they're under a lot of pressure right now. And particularly out of Asia, there's an awful lot of discounting of perfectly good technology. So, and I think, listen, I'm a big Apple user, but I think we all have a little bit of a low key, like brand erosion going on, with the prices and always I need a new plugin and the updates that don't give me anything better. Like there's just kind of a low key erosion.
Look, it's hard to stay great for really long.
It is.
I
And
mean,
they're
and
so big, right?
and-
And so we like to really, criticize the behemoths Yeah, it's hard to stay great. I would say on the flip side, like a brand that, we don't work with, but I really admire what they've done is Domino's.
Yeah.
I just think they've done, a beautiful job. I think most people know, like they kind of owned their problems a number of years ago, and they've really come out with better recipes. Like their pizza's better. Like I don't know if you've had it recently, but like it's still very reasonably priced. It tastes a whole lot better. They have a great app. They've
Look,
done
and their
lots of
problem was their pizzas tasted badly. Their delivery was bad. Everything about the brand was bad. And they have systemically rebooted everything.
When I was in college, we got a late night pizza from Domino's one night. This is before they fixed their problems. It had no sauce on it. We were like, what is this? Like, it's a calzone. I don't know what to do with this thing.
Okay. Look, this is perfect to move in to our traditional last question, the sauceless pizza, which, we should trademark this, and maybe that's a new Taylor Swift song too.
It could be.
Could be. So our traditional last question is two-parter. You have to take one or both. Practical advice we haven't talked about yet for our listeners, and or funniest story you can share on the air. You have to take at least one part of this, but you can take both.
All right. I'm going to take door number 2. I'm going to go funniest story. I have noticed in your episodes that a lot of people take the advice. So I'm going to go the other way. So I'm going to start out by saying that nobody was long-term harmed in this story.
All right. So
that's why it's funny. We do a lot of live facilitations, and we were doing one for Samsung in Chicago. It was a multi-day training. They had flown people in from all over, and there was a senior leader there. I'm going to call him Jim, and Jim is just fine now. Again, I want to emphasize. So we start the session, and in the first hour of the first day, we are running a panel discussion of leaders at the front of the room, and Jim has a heart attack in the front of the room and falls like a brick off of his like high chair. They were on like bar stool type chairs. Literally falls face down like a brick. Ambulance, the whole 9 yards. What was funny is that Jim had this colleague. They were peers, and we'll call this guy Martin. Right. Martin and Jim did not get along. Oil and water. Okay. So Jim keels over, and Martin is like really good at like fire and rescue, safety, all of that. Yep. He bolts to the front of the room. He's giving him mouth-to-mouth CPR. Jim comes to, looks up at Martin and says, "Why are you making out with me?"
I feel like this is an office thing, and I only wish that Martin had kissed Jim on the forehead. That I care about deeply.
Yeah, or just held his hand and said, I'll see you in a little while or something. Yeah. So they're not really, they're like, what do we learn from such things? I mean, I went and got CPR trained, like no lie. I felt so useless in that room, and I went and got CPR trained after that because I never wanted to feel that way again. But Jim is alive and well, and we gave everybody like a 2-hour break and said like, walk it off. And then, we got on with the thing.
All right. I have another question. Just before we end the show, did you guys eat the pizza without the sauce, Mike? If you did, because we're in college.
We had a couple beers.
So yes, you did.
Yes, 100%. We ate the whole thing.
All right. Very good. Well, I think that's a great way to end the show. Thank you, Nancie. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. These shows include the top 5 mistakes CEOs and boards make when hiring CMOs, a rapid evolution in the marketplace, the Spencer Stewart 2025 CMO study, lessons learned from the 2024 presidential election, parts 1 and 2, and the Omnicom IPG merger, what it means and what's next. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential. Marketers have been working on personalization since the dawn of the internet, and actually even earlier than that. Now with AI, you can deliver ads made for each of your customers. Publicis Sapient is committed to faster, better personalization and is proud to introduce Slingshot and Bodhi AI. Now, these AI platforms are designed to customize every key touch point and reduce creative timelines from weeks to days. With Publicis Sapient, marketing isn't just fast, it's personal. Smarter marketing, happier teams, wow-worthy customer moments. Upgrade your marketing at publicissapient.com.